I was 9 years old, standing in our frigid November kitchen, my fingers numb and sticky with cheap red spray paint, while my 6-year-old brother Brent screamed nonstop into the stale afternoon air. All he wanted was the shiny red bicycle locked behind the glass window of Hill's department store, its chrome handlebars glowing bright under fluorescent lights, a perfect, untouched toy he'd fixated on for days. Our dad had just lost his factory job for the first time that season, and our mom worked double shifts at a local diner, never walking through the front door before 10 at night, exhausted and drained. We didn't have extra money for luxury wants, but Brent didn't care. He cried like only a small child can, loud, unapologetic, relentless wails that filled every corner of our tiny house, demanding the world bend to his desire. I sat cross-legged on the linoleum floor, quiet and uncomplaining, taking apart the training wheels from my beat-up blue bike with a rusty screwdriver, rigging them onto a broken, discarded bike our neighbor had left on their curb. I scrubbed off years of grime and scuffs, then coated the entire frame with the cheapest red spray paint the hardware store sold. The fumes burned my throat and stung my eyes, so I propped every window in the house open all night, letting the bitter autumn wind rush in and freeze my hands solid. I worked until midnight, determined to give my little brother the red bike he wanted, hoping my effort would quiet the chaos and make everyone happy. But the second Brent saw my handiwork the next morning, he smiled for exactly 3 seconds before his face fell flat. This wasn't his bike, it wasn't new, wasn't shiny, wasn't the perfect one from the store window. My mom knelt down to cup his face, kissed his forehead softly, and cooed over how upset he was. Then she glanced over at me, still covered in paint smudges and shivering from the cold night, and sighed, telling him, "Look how hard your sister tried, she's such a good, sensible girl." By the end of that day, she'd taken Brent straight to Hills and bought him the exact red bicycle he'd begged for. That night, I sat alone on our back porch steps, while my dad stepped outside to smoke a cigarette in the dark. He brushed a hand gently over my hair, never bothering to meet my eyes, and spoke in a low, tired voice that stuck in my head for 34 years. "You're the strong one, Philia. We don't have to worry about you, we can always count on you." I swallowed those words whole, heavy and scorching like a hot stone lodged in my chest. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I just sat there and learned my first brutal lesson about family love. Being the strong, reliable child isn't a compliment. It's an invisible contract. Back then, I thought it was a reward for being good. It took me over 3 decades to realize I'd signed a lifelong, unbreakable agreement to shrink my own needs so everyone else's could take center stage. I signed the papers for my first house on a gray, drizzly March weekday, straight off a 12-hour night shift at the hospital. My eyes were heavy and ringed with dark, bruised circles, my scrubs crumpled and stained from work, covered by a frayed second-hand coat I'd pulled from a community donation bin. I walked into the title company office exhausted, drained, and entirely alone. The woman working the front desk scanned my pay stubs and meager savings statement, lifted her eyebrows in quiet surprise, and asked if my parents knew I was buying a house by myself. I told her flat out that I didn't need them to know. This was mine. She slid a thick stack of legal documents across the polished desk toward me, a pile of paper so dense it felt like an old phone book. I picked up a borrowed ballpoint pen and signed my full name, Ophelia Owen, slowly, neatly, deliberately on every single line, just like I'd practiced on every exam paper in nursing school. My hand started shaking halfway through the final document, but it wasn't from fatigue. It was the single word printed on the page that unraveled me, grantee. Beneath that legal label was only my name. No parents, no brother, no family attachments, no safety nets, no one else to fall back on. Just me. For the first time in my entire life, I understood how much weight a single name could hold when it stood completely alone. That night, I inserted my new key into the lock and turned it, stepping into an empty, echoing house. The floors bore a faint, faded scratch running all the way from the living room to the kitchen, a leftover mark from the previous owners, looking like a shallow, dried, up riverbed. I laid down flat on the bare floor, staring up at the ceiling where a thin, winding crack stretched from the light fixture all the way to the corner, a slow steady river running through the center of my new home. I'd earned this space through 12 years of endless night shifts, overtime hours, and skipped breaks, sacrificing sleep, leisure, and every small luxury just to build something that belonged only to me. The ceiling was cracked, the yard had a lopsided maple tree, and the walls were bare, but lying there on that cold floor, I felt something I'd never known growing up. Safe later, when people ask about my house, they only ever fixate on the logistics, the mortgage rate, the neighborhood, the school district, the resale value. No one ever asks how it felt to finally have a space that no one could take from me. It's the strangest, quietest victory, dismantling every piece of myself I'd been forced to give away my whole childhood, and planting new bones in the empty spaces, imperfect, a little crooked, but entirely, unapologetically mine. 3 weeks after I gave birth to my daughter Nora, the soft morning sunlight slanted through my kitchen window, catching tiny floating dust motes in the air as my baby slept soundly on my left shoulder. Her small chin rested perfectly in the curve of my collarbone, her breaths light and rhythmic, soft as gentle tide rolls on a quiet shore. I was still wearing a stained gray nursing tank top covered in faint milk marks, my hair unwashed for 3 days and twisted into a messy, loose bun, my feet slipped into worn fuzzy slippers, with one sole completely worn through. My mother stepped out of her guest bedroom that morning, dressed in her crisp, clean light blue cardigan, her hair brushed perfectly smooth, holding her ceramic coffee cup like it was a precious, sacred artifact. She didn't sit down, didn't greet me, didn't ask how I was recovering from birth or how the baby was sleeping. She just leaned against my vintage oak dining table, the one I'd sanded and refinished myself, still holding faint traces of old wax in its grooves, and delivered her announcement in a calm, unyielding tone, like she was reading a utility bill or a public transit schedule. Brent and Kayla are moving in next month. The kids will take the 2 upstairs bedrooms. You'll move down to the small downstairs room, and we're tearing out the nursery to fit their bunk bed. There was no question, no request, no acknowledgement that this was my home, my hard-earned space. My fingers tightened instinctively at my sides, my nails pressing deep half-moon indentations into my palms, but I felt no physical pain. All I could feel was the cold, familiar numbness of being erased, of my needs being pushed aside for my brother's convenience. I held my sleeping daughter close and spoke softly, firmly. "Mom, this is my house." She looked at me then with a tired, patronizing patience, the exact look you give someone who's too slow to understand basic, obvious facts. "Don't be so rigid, Philia. They need a home. This is just a house for you. You're stronger than this. You'll always find somewhere to land. They need this more than you do." She took a slow sip of her coffee after speaking, then casually asked if I wanted a chicken salad sandwich for lunch, like she hadn't just stripped me of my home and my daughter's carefully prepared nursery in one breath. Nora shifted gently on my shoulder, her tiny fist curling into the neckline of my worn pajamas, clinging tight to the only safety she knew. In that quiet morning moment, I realized a cruel truth no one ever taught me growing up. In my family, strength was never a virtue. It was a loophole, an excuse to take everything I had, because I was always expected to endure it without complaint. 4 weeks after Nora was born, Kayla showed up at my door unannounced, claiming she just wanted to check out the rooms ahead of their move, and I stood in my entryway for a full minute, debating whether I should close the door in her face and end this invasion before it started. But the 9-year-old girl inside me was still there, whispering the old rules I'd lived by my whole life. Don't cause trouble, don't upset the family, don't make anyone uncomfortable, just take it and be strong. So I stepped aside and let her walk in. She sauntered through my front door in pristine white sneakers and tight jeans, phone in hand. No gratitude, no hesitation, no respect for the home I'd built alone. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, holding my sleeping baby, listening to her footsteps thud overhead, each step a tiny nail hammering into the floors I'd worked so hard to own. She pushed open the door to my daughter's nursery, the room I'd spent 3 entire weekends painting, layering primer, soft blue paint, and careful edge touch, ups until my hands ached. I'd cried alone in that empty room once I finished, overwhelmed by the quiet joy of creating a safe, beautiful space for my child, a luxury I'd never had as a kid. Kayla stood in front of that soft blue wall, raised her phone, and snapped photos without a single word of appreciation. "I'm sending these to Brent," she said casually. "Gotta see if their boy's bunk bed will fit right against this wall." She turned to me with a bright, unbothered smile moments later. "Is the storage closet big enough? The kids have so many toys, you know how little boys are." I tried to speak up, to tell her this wasn't up for debate, but she cut me off mid-sentence, already dismissing my boundaries. "Mom's already sorted it all out for us, Philia, don't stress, we'll take good care of this house." She said this house, never your home. She spoke of it like a temporary rental, a communal storage unit, a disposable object that belonged to the entire family instead of solely to me. Once she left, I shut the nursery door gently, laid Nora down in her crib, and knelt on the floor, pressing my forehead against the cool wooden railing. I breathed in the faint, lingering scent of fresh blue paint, still curing into the walls I'd built for my daughter. That's when I finally understood what invasion truly feels like. It's not always a violent, forced break. And sometimes it's slow, silent, insidious. It's watching your family slowly drain the ownership from your home, piece by piece, until your most sacred spaces no longer feel like they belong to you at all. I called my lawyer, Miss Alvarez, late one night, while Nora slept soundly in her crib. I kept my voice low and my phone volume turned all the way down, a lifelong habit of hiding my struggles, of never letting my family catch me standing up for myself. The baby monitor glowed softly on the nightstand, showing the steady rise and fall of my daughter's tiny chest. Each small breath a quiet reminder of why I couldn't keep surrendering anymore. Miss Alvarez listened silently as I laid out everything. My mother living in my home rent, free for 2 years, her unilateral decision to move Brent's entire family into my space, the group chat messages confirming their planned move date, even the spare key my brother had been given without my permission. She never interrupted, never judged, never expressed shock. I could hear the soft rustle of paper as she reviewed case files on her end, her tone calm, neutral, and unemotional, like she was walking me through a standard routine procedure. Under Ohio state law, she explained clearly, your mother is considered a month-to-month tenant by residency. You can't legally change the locks and remove her immediately. You need to serve official written notice with a 30-day compliance period, and if she refuses to vacate after that, you can file for court eviction. I scribbled every word down in my notebook, pressing my pen so hard into the paper it left tiny, permanent indentations on the page. Then she said the words that changed everything for me. Your brother and his family have zero legal claim here. They've never resided in this home, never paid bills, never contributed anything. They are only guests. Guests have no rights the second you revoke their invitation. If they force their way in after you explicitly tell them not to come, that's criminal trespassing. I stared at the baby monitor for a long time after she spoke, watching Nora breathe, steady and unafraid in her innocence. The only real question here, Miss Alvarez said quietly, is whether you're finally ready to exercise your own rights. I'd spent my whole life holding back, keeping the peace, prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own. I had a legal right to my home, but I'd never dared to use it, scared of being labeled selfish, unkind, difficult. That Sunday morning, I printed out the formal notice and set it down beside my mother's coffee mug, the chipped faded ceramic one I'd bought for her at a charity store when I was 12, emblazoned with the peeling words "World's Best Mom." After 34 years of signing away my own peace, I was finally ready to stop complying. A knock came at my front door days later, right after I'd finished nursing Nora. My shirt was still unbuttoned at the chest, marked with faint milk stains, my hair messy and unbrushed. I opened the door to find a county child and family services worker standing on my porch, holding a green plastic folder, her official photo ID clipped to her shirt. She introduced herself as Miss McFarlane and said she'd received an anonymous complaint, alleging I was suffering from severe postpartum instability, claiming my infant daughter was at risk of harm in my care. She delivered the news in a flat scripted tone, like she was reciting a recipe rather than accusing a new mother of endangering her child. I stepped aside and let her in, my fingers trembling slightly even as my voice stayed calm and steady. 12 years working in NICU had taught me to separate my body's panic from my words. I pulled out every single one of Nora's medical records, pediatric checkups, vaccination logs, follow-up appointment schedules, every proof that my daughter was healthy, safe, and well cared for. Miss McFarlane inspected my fridge, checked the expiration dates on my formula, verified my crib was safely positioned with no loose bedding, and asked standard questions about my sleep schedule, mood, and daily routine. I answered every question honestly, no over-explanation, no defensiveness, no hidden lies. 20 minutes later, she closed her folder with a quiet sigh. There are no safety concerns here, everything is completely compliant. I'm sorry for the disruption. I shut the door behind her and leaned back against the wood, my legs finally giving way to the shaking I'd suppressed. Nora fussed in my arms, sensing my tension, and I sat down on the sofa to nurse her again. Hot silent tears spilled down my face, dripping onto her soft blanket and darkening the pale cotton fabric. I didn't need to guess who'd made the anonymous call. Minutes later, my family group chat lit up. My Aunt Rose posted a passive, aggressive message, saying how heartbreaking it was that I was making big, stressful decisions alone while struggling with postpartum life. My mother replied immediately with a single praying hands emoji. In that moment, I understood fully what they'd done. They weren't just trying to take my house, they were using my newborn baby as a pawn, weaponizing my motherhood to manipulate me, to force me into submission, to make me back down and let them take everything I'd built. They'd weaponized my love for my child to keep me trapped in the same old role, the strong self-sacrificing daughter who gives and gives until there's nothing left. Move-in day arrived soft and gray, shrouded in thin misty fog that hung over my maple tree like a damp, worn curtain. By mid-morning, the fog had lifted, leaving the air quiet and still. I stood in my kitchen sipping warm coffee, Nora asleep and peaceful on my shoulder, her breathing slow and steady like a quiet growing thing. At exactly 8:47 a.m., the first U-Haul truck rumbled down my quiet street, its low heavy engine vibration cutting through the neighborhood silence. It backed clumsily into my driveway, followed closely by Kayla's SUV, and my Aunt Rose's sedan. One by one, they all climbed out, no one rushing, no one grateful, no one acknowledging this was my private property. Brent wore a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, hiding his face. Kayla walked with her hands stuffed in her pockets, taking on the role of silent director, overseeing the invasion. Aunt Rose stood on my lawn with her arms crossed tight over her chest, her lips pressed into a thin, judgmental line. My mother stepped out last, perfectly groomed and calm, her expression blank, like a polished mirror, no sign of guilt or hesitation. None of them knocked. Brent walked straight to the back of the U-Haul and yanked open the metal roll door, the high-pitched scrape of metal, cutting through the quiet morning. Kayla marched up my walkway, pushed open the screen door I'd built, and repaired myself last summer, splintering my careful personal work with one careless motion, and set a large cardboard box marked Boys' Toys directly on my front doorstep. They began unloading their lives into my home right then, folding bunk beds, plastic storage bins, old lamps wrapped in newspaper, a scuffed blue dinosaur kid's chair. I stood frozen at my living room window, holding my sleeping daughter, watching them treat my lifelong sacrifice like a public storage unit, a space they were entitled to take simply because I was family, simply because I'd always let them take from me before. Then my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. My mother was calling me from my own front yard. I pressed the intercom button on my front door camera slowly, deliberately, no anger, no panic, no hesitation. Nora shifted on my shoulder, turning her tiny head to find a softer resting spot, her cheek brushing against a faint old scar on my collarbone. I'd gotten that burn when I was 18, working a chaotic restaurant shift to pay for nursing school tuition, a permanent mark I'd carried through every hard season of my life. In humid weather, when I was exhausted, when I was stretched too thin, that scar always ached, a quiet reminder of every time I'd pushed through pain alone. Her small, cold fingers rested gently against my neck, trusting me completely, leaning her full weight into my chest like an unsealed letter, honest and vulnerable, and safe in my arms. The intercom crackled with a short static burst the second I pressed down. Outside, every single person froze mid-movement. Brent's hand hovered over a box of toys. Kayla's foot hung suspended over my threshold. Aunt Rose's eyes went wide with shock. My mother's phone froze halfway to her ear. I spoke in a slow, even, unshakable tone, no raised voice, no argument, no unnecessary explanation. This is my house. 5 simple words, 12 quiet syllables, spoken with the same steady care I'd used to sign my name on every legal document that granted me this freedom. I released the button and stepped back into my empty quiet hallway, reclaiming my space. The silence outside stretched for 2 long, breathless seconds before the chaos erupted. Aunt Rose slammed her fists against my front door, yelling through the wood that I was being cruel, that family comes first, that I was abandoning my own blood. I heard the sharp, crisp crack of my mother's phone slipping from her hand, slamming screen, first onto the concrete flower bed outside. The sound sharp and final through the solid door. I didn't move, I didn't respond. I just stood there with my baby in my arms, staring up at the faint golden ceiling crack I'd laid beneath years before, the quiet river that had witnessed every late night, every tear, every moment of lonely survival. I thought of the quiet promise I'd whispered to Nora the second she was born, so soft I'd wondered if I'd truly said it out loud. You will never have to be the strong one for anyone. You will never have to shrink to keep the peace. You will never have to earn your right to take up space outside. One by one, the car engines turned over. The U-Haul, the SUV, the sedan, all of them pulled away from my driveway, their fading engines fading into the distance until the street fell completely silent. A single short horn blared from the end of the road before everything went still. The maple tree outside my window swayed gently in the soft wind, its leaves flipping to show their silvery undersides, like hundreds of tiny flags marking my hard-won freedom. The floorboards beneath my feet creaked softly, the familiar sound of a home finally returned to its rightful owner. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't have to be the strong, reliable, self-sacrificing daughter. I just got to be me, and I got to be my daughter's safe place. Have you ever been stuck in that invisible family role? The one who's always expected to be strong, always expected to give, always expected to lose so others can win. What was the moment you finally decided to stop shrinking for everyone else? Share your story in the comments below. If you've ever felt drained by unappreciated family obligations, hit the like button, follow me, and subscribe for more raw, honest stories about breaking generational cycles and choosing yourself first.